My name is Liz Cartland, and I'm the Director of Individual Giving here at the Harvard Art Museums. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our virtual tour of the Arnold Arboretum's Bonsai Collection this morning. On behalf of my colleagues who are joining us today, especially Shannon Kemper, Ann Starnbach, Kara Haugen-Mello, and Melanie Sheffield, as well as our friends at the Arboretum, Janetta Stringfellow and Michael Dosman, we're happy to see you this morning, and we thank you especially for your ongoing support. It is, as you know, now more important than ever. And if you're joining us as a guest, we certainly would welcome your support and involvement as a friend, especially during these unprecedented times. This is just the first, just one of many virtual programs that we're offering. And so I encourage you to keep checking our website and your email for the latest updates. It's the best way to see you until we're able to welcome you in person on campus again. Before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping items. For today's tour, we ask that you mute your microphone. And what we do is we recommend that you change your Zoom setting to speaker view. That way you'll be able to see the screen and the bonsai in the full format. That's up in the corner if you don't know how to change your view on your computer. And in the, if you're on your iPhone, just swipe until you can see a big picture.
Gallery, this is speaker view, okay.
All right. While Steve tours the bonsai collection, he's going to be moving from plant to plant. And at that time, you may see a bonsai, an image of a bonsai come up on the screen. That's normal. Just wait with us. It's just while he walks from space to space. Finally, if you have questions, please submit them via the chat function. And we're going to answer as many questions as time allows this morning. Okay, now our program. We're so happy to have the opportunity today to hear from Rachel Saunders and Steve Schneider. Rachel Saunders is the Abby Aldrich Rockefeller Curator of Asian Art here at the museums, and she is responsible for our Japanese collections. She earned her PhD from Harvard and is a specialist in medieval narrative and sacred painting. And of course, Rachel is the curator behind Painting Edo, Japanese art from the Feinberg Collection, which I hope some of you got, if not all of you got a chance to see before we closed in March. Some of you may also remember her wonderful exhibition, Prince Shotoku, The Secrets Within, which was on view last year at this time. After her opening remarks, we will turn it over to Steve Schneider. Steve is the Director of Operations and Public Programs at the Arnold Arboretum. He has a BS in biology from Northeastern and an ALM in sustainability and environmental management from the Harvard Extension School. As Director of Operations, Steve oversees the activities of public programs, horticulture, plant production, and facilities, and he also curates the Collection, which is why we're here today. Please join me in welcoming Rachel and Steve.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Hi, I'm just going to share my screen, so bear with me a second. All right, I think we're there. Liz, are we there? Okay, great. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome, and thank you, Liz, for that introduction. We're really delighted to be able to share this time with you and to have Steve giving us this amazing tour of the Arboretum's bonsai trees. I'm just going to speak for a couple of minutes because the event is connected with Painting Edo, Japanese art from the Feinberg Collection, which was it was our current special exhibition at the Harvard Art Museums. Painting Edo is an exhibition of about 120 works of Japanese painting. They're paintings from Japan's early modern period, the Edo period, which is 1615 to 1868. And the paintings are all in the collection of Robert and Betsy Feinberg, and they've been promised to the Harvard Art Museums. It's the largest exhibition we've ever put on in the history of the museums, which is wonderful for Japanese art, of course, but it's also fitting that the exhibition is the size it is because it is this very significant gift of art. It's the largest gift of art that's ever been offered to the museums. So hang on, just having there we go. Painting Edo. This is our hero image, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and I do hope that some of you may have had the chance to see the exhibition in person before we had to temporarily close on March the 12th. I'm showing you here the opening night, which was February 13th, a very happy evening when we did open the exhibition. We do have for you now, during this period of closure, a range of online materials for you to access the exhibition. And if you go to our website and click on the Harvard Art Museums from Home button, you can find some of them there, or through the exhibition webpage. We have about 4 or 5 videos for you right now to take a look at. Now, Painting Edo is an exhibition that provides a way to move through a history of early modern Japanese art through compelling images that have caused global art historical disruptions during their history, and they continue to influence our image of Japan today. But what it really was for me was an opportunity to experience seeing a little bit differently through an immersive environment. So we tried to select works and design the show so that it would be as immersive as possible. One thing that visitors to the exhibition have noticed almost immediately is the enormous range of flowering plants and trees that are depicted in the paintings. Now, this is a key part of the vocabulary of East Asian painting, in which the genre of bird and flower painting occupies an important place alongside landscape painting and figure painting. In Japan, bird and flower painting is tied closely to ideas of seasonality, to poetry, to the evocation of famous natural sites, which all work together to generate the ability to experience a kind of secondary or communally imagined, internalized nature. And that's something that for me, recently, having been indoors rather a lot, has felt particularly powerful and important. Today's special tour with Steve Schneider of the Arnold Arboretum, to which I am very much looking forward, is a sort of natural outgrowth of our first joint event with the Arnold Arboretum, which was a members' coffee with curators, which took place at the end of February, at which Michael Dosman, who's the keeper of living collections at the Arboretum, and myself presented together on Painting Edo and Planting Edo. And when I visited the exhibition with Michael prior to that event, my mode of seeing was actually quite profoundly changed for the details that he was able to show me in these paintings that capture the essence, of the botanical characteristics of the plants that are depicted. Looking with Michael, it became clear beyond doubt that the painters of these works knew these plants intimately from life, and that you could even today teach a class in botanical taxa from some of these paintings. Now, we're really, really fortunate to have here Steve Schneider, who's going to be giving us this tour of the Arboretum's bonsai collection today. There are no bonsai paintings in the exhibition itself, but I do have a bonsai painting from the Feinberg Collection to share with you now that just offers a glimpse of the special place in Japanese culture that these diminutive trees occupy. And here it is. This is a painting depicting the 13th century samurai named Sano Genzaemon, who's contemplating his bonsai. Now, the painting dates to about 1850. But it encapsulates a very well-known story of a morally upright warrior who'd fallen on hard times, as you can see here from the sort of tattered roof of his very modest dwelling and the sort of crumbling plasterwork. And nevertheless, even in his hard times, he maintains his steadfast devotion to his bonsai trees. And we can see him here taking quiet solace in the company of these trees right here, a blossoming miniature plum tree and a miniature pine tree right here. And in fact, both of these are traditional symbols of resilience and longevity. Together with the bamboo that's here in the garden, which persists because it bends but does not break in adverse weather, we have all of the so-called three friends. So we have the pine tree, the plum tree, and the bamboo, all together symbolically underscoring the upright character of the old warrior who persists as the plants do, even in the most difficult of circumstances. I'm so delighted that we have this opportunity to experience some living bonsai today with Steve, and perhaps some of these are going to be as old or even older than this painting. Steve, thank you so much for having us. We can't wait to hear from you and to meet some of these very special trees. Thank you.
Wow, Rachel, thank you. This is a tough act to follow. I kind of wish that I went first. Well, welcome everybody. I know that months ago we had planned on this being something that we were all going to do in person. But the situation being what it is, we are going to do our best here. And I'm going to try to give you the experience or a similar experience, but through the magic of Zoom. And so I'll start off by saying that the Arboretum's 281 acres is most of it is our living collection of trees, shrubs, and vines that are growing in the ground. We have at our propagation facility, which is where I am right now, we have many trees in pots that are destined to go into the ground, but we also care for our bonsai and penjing collection here, which are destined to always remain in their pots. The Arboretum first got its bonsai collection from Larz Anderson, and I don't know if you can see what my camera is pointing at right now, but it's a plaque that is over the display pavilion. It reads, "The Larz Anderson Collection of Japanese Dwarf Trees, presented to the Arnold Arboretum as a memorial to his friend Charles Sprague Sargent." Charles Sprague Sargent being our first director. And Larz Anderson was briefly the ambassador to Japan during the Taft administration, during the last year of the Taft administration. And when he returned from his duties overseas, he brought with him roughly 37 plants. They came over from Japan onto a boat all the way to California, and then they made their way across the United States on rail and arrived in Boston in 1913. And sometime between the mid-1930s and mid-1950s is when the Anderson estate donated this collection in its entirety to the Arboretum. And so it's had many homes, over the years, and the attention that the Arboretum has paid to the collection has also varied over the years. And when the plants first arrived, when they first arrived in the United States with the Andersons actually brought a person from Japan with them to care for the plants. There were no people in the United States that really knew how to care for these plants. And so when they got to the Arboretum, it was the same situation. There really was nobody that knew how to care for the plants. And so they did their best, not having access to bring a Japanese person over to care for the collection. And so over the years, the collection did dwindle a little bit through death and through theft. And it is the plight of the living collection, in that nothing is guaranteed. And the nature of bonsai and the nature of penjing, or just even any type of dwarving of plants in pots, is that we kind of keep them right on the edge of their existence with what is done to their living systems in order to achieve the grace and beauty that we hope to get out of them. So I'm going to pan the camera down just a little bit. I think Rachel mentioned that when I'm making large moves, or I'm going to turn my screen off so as not to cause seasickness. But what you're looking at here, if you haven't been here before, and maybe you have, is our display pavilion. I was very excited this year. We had installed a new set of gates and fences to increase and improve our visitor circulation, and then this all happened. And so right now, obviously, the pavilion is not open to patrons, but we hope that you do come back and join when things begin to turn to normal. But what you're looking at is where we would normally display the plants. Each of those pedestals, and I'm going to move in just a little bit here, each of those pedestals will house one plant overall, there are about 40 to 44 plants either in the collection or being developed at the moment. And we only display about 15 of them at a time. Proper display of these plants requires good height, lots of negative space, and this is actually not the most ideal way to display them because of the slats in the background, but it gets us to where we need to go. And so right now, because of the situation, again, we've wanted to bale some hay here, and there are several plants that were due to be repotted, and I'll explain repotting in a moment. But it is basically like open heart surgery for the plants, especially the older ones. And our oldest living bonsai that we have from the Anderson collection is from 1737, so it predates the birth of this country. So and most of the other ones are either from the late 1700s or early to mid 1800s that are from the Anderson collection. So as you can imagine, anytime we go into the root system of these plants, we really think of it as open heart surgery. The plant that you see before you right now is a Taxodium. That is a much younger plant. And you can see, I'll get a little bit closer. If you all haven't noticed, it's been quite cold this spring. And so Taxodium during normal times takes a little while to push out. This year, here we are in mid-May practically, and it's still, the buds are just starting to come out, but it is quite slow. So we've also had we've had an odd year in a number of different respects, and one of them has been the weather. And so we've been taking advantage of both the cold weather and the fact that we do not have any of our plants on display. And we're really focusing right now on repotting. So hence, under normal circumstances, this house would be full of plants on display. And right now, most of our plants are sitting, or a good majority of them are sitting in the ICU after being repotted, just because we can take advantage of the fact that many of them needed to be repotted and we didn't have to have any of them on display. The one that you're looking at here is our largest plant, and it's obstructed by sorry for the movement, it's obstructed by a metal plate there. That metal plate is attached to a pair of forks. This plant is quite large. It's weighs probably over 300 pounds. And so we tend to move that one with a small forklift. And that one is destined to get some root work done, and we're going to compete with a string trimmer. Hope you don't mind. It's going to get some pruning done. And so we left the forks on because we're going to move that one very soon. But this is one of our old Chamaecyparis, and this one here was started in 1829, and it has changed over the years. Bonsai, the style of bonsai really didn't come into existence until the mid to late 1800s, and so these plants that were started in the 1700s and before that, they weren't really started in what we call bonsai style. They were styled in what was called hachinoki, and hachinoki was a practice of taking the plant and turning, giving it a specific shape, shaping the plant it was still a tree in a pot, and they would shape it to represent a specific object. And all of the plants all of the Chamaecyparis, these evergreens that we got from Anderson in our collection, were originally shaped in what was called the Mount Fuji style, and they were supposed to represent Mount Fuji, and it's believed that they were at one point put in or kept in Shinto temples until the turn of the 20th century, when everything in Japanese was very popular in the States, and the Japanese were selling lots and lots of things to the States, including dwarf plants. All of these plants came from the Yokohama Nursery Company, and the Yokohama Nursery Company is still in existence. It's not a nursery the way we think of it. They don't have, and I went to Japan. I've been to Japan several times now, and visited the Yokohama Nursery Company, and it's really just a building. They are a middleman, and that's what they were back in the day as well. And they buy plants in from different sources and then resell them. And so I'm going to begin to compete now with a chainsaw. So I'm gonna mute my screen, but I'm not going to mute my microphone, and I'm going to move to the next location. And Rachel, or whoever is, and I'll get into a little bit more about the history when we get away from some of this background noise. But I will mute my screen, but if somebody wants to read out any questions that may have come up, I can walk and talk at the same time. And if there are no questions, I will gladly talk about what my next move here is going to be. We're going to go behind the scenes. So I started the tour out in an area where the general public can come in when we're open. But behind the scenes, which is where we're going to spend the majority of the time here, behind the scenes, we have another house. We call it our lath house. Pardon the wind. And this is a space where we keep our plants that are either not on display because we don't have the room. Like I said, we only put about 15 plants out at a time, and part of that is because we have limited space for display, but the other aspect of that is so we can keep the display fresh. So just because you come and visit it in the month of April doesn't mean that you've seen everything that we have to offer. We usually try once a month to change up the display with a few fresh plants. And I will turn my video on, and I'll show you that this is where we are. We are inside of the lath house, and you can see that this is obviously not a space for display. It's a space where we can keep these plants secure. Of course, there's a very elaborate security system that tends to these plants 24/7, as you can imagine. And so we got to keep the plants safe. But we also have to shade the plants. We have to, sun is good, but too much sun can burn our tender plants. So we want to provide them with some shade. So you can see that we're obviously in a shade structure. So some of these plants are waiting in air quotes to go on display. And I'm going to move over to those plants right now. This is our weeping Cedras, which is a gorgeous plant. I'm just going to make some adjustments here. Again, pardon the movement. So this plant here, I curate the collection. Before me was Peter Daltredici, who curated the collection for 25 years. Peter was also the director of Living Collections and senior research scientist here. So we don't have a full-time curator. And prior to that, we didn't even have a curator who was officially on staff. Her name was Connie Dadarian. And Connie came in the 1960s, and she was part of the Northeast bonsai movement of the 60s. And she's a bit of a legend around here because in the 40s and the 50s, the Anderson collection really did suffer. And part of the problem was just nobody knew how to handle the plants. And so Connie came in as a volunteer in the 60s, had studied with folks to learn the art of bonsai, and she came in and worked on the plants and essentially saved the collection that we have right now. We really do give her that credit. And since then, the Anderson collection has been rehabbed by a gentleman. His name is Colin Lewis. He is a bonsai master who lives up in Maine, and he spent the majority of 10 years rehabbing the Anderson collection. But this plant here is not from the Anderson collection. This is one of Connie. Connie is no longer with us, but before she passed, she donated several plants to the collection. And so we don't just have Anderson plants here. We have been slowly adding plants to the collection. And so this weeping cedrus, this gorgeous weeping cedrus, is one that Connie started, and one that fortunately we've been able to keep alive. And then I'm just going to pan over to the right a little bit.
Steve, may I interrupt
Yes.
with a question?
Yes.
This is Shannon speaking. One of our viewers has asked, one moment, to help us understand what's involved, could you tell us how often you water the gorgeous weeping plant we are looking at?
Yes. So let's just jump right into it. Why not? So you're actually looking at so each plant, and this is going to be a very, very frustrating answer. Any of you who are mathematicians or physicists out there, you're not going to like the answer to any of my questions. Anybody who has studied biology will understand. None of these plants are going to respond to the same treatment, one single treatment. And a lot of that has to do with the actual plant itself, the species, but also just the situation that the plant it finds itself. So the plant that you're looking at right now, which is Japanese white pine, Pinus Parba Flora, and I'm going to bring it a little closer here. And you can see that the majority of what you're looking at is a big rock. This is a big chunk of limestone. And the root for this plant that's right here is coming down right down here. So that's the plant is kind of, when this was started, it was wired to the rock, and the roots were trained to go down into the soil, which is in the pot. Okay. There are a few roots up on top of the rock where we have some soil, but the majority of it is down here. So you can imagine during the growing season, just the basic care needs. These plants need 7-day-a-week monitoring. They are checked for water 3 times a day. That doesn't mean that they're watered 3 times a day. They're going to require water more when they are actively growing. So again, I don't know if you can quite see it, but I'm going to move these needles away. You can see that these were last year's needles or the previous year's needles. And then you can see these little buds pushing out here. These are what we call candles. And the candles are pushing out. So this plant is actively growing. So it's going to actually want more water now, obviously, because it's got a lot going on. Once this stops pushing out, once the heat of the summer comes, we actually have to pull back on the water. We're still checking it 3 times a day, sometimes more. Sometimes they require a misting, which would just be using a fine nozzle to spray the foliage. But this one here is actually a lot easier to water than the Connie plant, which is over here, this weeping cedrus. And you can see it's in a very different plant, very different pot rather, very different, and this is super deep. And so one might think, well, this is actually going to be able to hold more water, and you're going to have to water this less frequently than, say, something of a pot that's more wide and flat. And it's actually the opposite. And this has to do with physics and just basic gravity. This is like holding a sponge up on end. All the water just wants to drain down and through the pot, as opposed to if you have something nice and flat, the water will tend to stay in that specific area. Because this is of the style that this is, because of the shape, because this is a weeper and we want it to go actually, let me see what you're looking at here. I'm going to just tilt down a little bit. We want it to go below the bottom of the pot. You know, the actual plant goes maybe 8 or 9 inches below the pot. It has to be in this nice deep pot. So we actually have to check this water, check this plant very carefully for water. We get to the point where the easiest way to really tell is to pick it up. And so it's kind of like if you work with these things long enough, you can actually pick the pot up without even touching the soil and know that, this is getting a little dry.
Steve, there's one more question about the yellow tags. Can you tell us what those are?
Yellow tags. Are
Those on
we?
The first and the third plant.
Say that again?
It was on the first and the third plant.
So we, again, because these are not on display, so we have some labels in them that are telling us, things like, they're just notes because we have so many people working up here in the greenhouse operation, which is where the plants get all of their care, is a 7-day-a-week operation, but we have different people coming in. So especially when the plants are not on display, we'll have little stake labels in them. And if I want to say, I want you to hold back on water on this, or, the bonsai master who actually does the shaping and the repotting of these plants might have specific instructions about how he wants them watered, how he wants them fertilized for the next week. And so it's a very, it's our analog way of communicating. These little labels here, this here is just our accession labels. Each of our plants out in the landscape and even our bonsai all have Arboretum accession numbers and labels to go with them. How am I doing on time, everybody?
You have got about 20 minutes.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Okay. I don't want to bore everybody. I'm going to just make a small adjustment here, and I want you all to take a look at this plant. So I mentioned that we are, we have expanded our collection beyond just that of the Anderson collection. Actually, I should have just left that alone, huh? And this is an example of a plant that we acquired. Peter Del Tredigi, who I mentioned, who was our former curator. He, one of the things that the Arboretum does a lot of, and well, not right now, but is going to foreign lands to acquire new germplasm for the collection. So Peter spent a lot of time in the eastern part of China collecting seed for the Arboretum's collections. I've spent time, Michael, who's also on the call, spent time, he's also spent time in China. I've spent time in Japan. And so Peter was able to actually acquire 5 Penjing from China back in the early 90s. And what you're looking at here is a Chinese elm, which is a very popular plant to use for Penjing. And people might be wondering, well, what's the difference between Penjing and bonsai? Well, keeping in mind that bonsai is a style and literally means a tree in pot. And Penjing is the almost literal translation is scenery in pot. And so the Chinese are actually accredited with being the first ones to put trees in pots. And we see that, you know, even earlier, but you know, what comes to mind right now is that we see that in evidence of that. Sorry, I'm being distracted by a street sweeper. There's a lot of distractions out here. Just let that go by. Great. And so we see that in the early 1400s in Chinese literature, you know, trees in pots. And there's even some evidence that may suggest that, you know, it appears even earlier than that. But you know, the Chinese being the first to put trees in pots, their goal, their aim was not just to put a tree in a pot, but to capture an entire scene on a tray and bring it home. They didn't have cameras, obviously, and so they wanted to bring the majestic beauty from the wild to their homes. And a classic area of China where this is thought to have begun was in the Yellow Mountains in southeastern China. And so the idea was to incorporate, and we don't have any examples of this, but there are different types of penjing. There's rock penjing, there's water penjing, there's tree penjing, which is what we're looking at here. And so the idea would be to have a tray with a large, beautiful stone that would represent a mountain, and then to embed living trees on that stone and fill the tray with water. And so it might represent a mountain emerging from the ocean, with you know, small straggly trees growing off the side of it. And so over the years, with the exchange of information between different cultures, other cultures, including obviously the Japanese, decided that they wanted to grow trees in pots, and they had their own ideas of you know, how to go about things. In general, bonsai tends to be a little softer and I don't know if this is a word, but sweepier. If you can picture branches just kind of dropping and flowing, whereas penjing, that style tends to be more angular. And you can see that even though we have a bonsai master working on this particular plant, he is still trying to adhere to that tradition of penjing as being a bit more angular, a bit more straight. And I did spend some time in the Shanghai area a few years ago visiting penjing museums and gardens, and the lines between bonsai and penjing and just potted trees is often blurred. The Chinese will often call penjing bonsai and bonsai penjing, and it just kind of goes, you know, back and forth. So you know, we have several penjing. We obviously have more bonsai than penjing, but we do have some, and we're looking to eventually acquire a few more. So I don't know if anybody has any questions regarding bonsai and penjing. That was a pretty quick lesson. All right, so I have moved the camera. I'm gonna drop down a little bit here, and I'm gonna focus on, let's see, there we are. So this plant here, again, remaining on the thread of adding to our collection. So 5 years ago, we acquired 10 additional plants from a man, his name is Martin Klein. Again, another person who kind of grew up, you know, at the, I guess it would be the tail end of the East Coast bonsai movement, knew Connie Didarian before she passed. And Marty has been working, he's been, you know, doing bonsai for 45 years or so. And, you know, he wanted to help us out. So we got into some discussions about him donating some of his plants. And, you know, when I was selecting them, I was particularly interested in species that we did not have. And Marty has been a member of the Arboretum for decades, and he has been the recipient of many a plant giveaway. And what he would do sometimes is take those little seedlings that we would give away, and he would start training them to become bonsai. And this one is really cool. This is a crab apple, and you can see it's quite lovely coming into bloom. And I'll get a little closer in a moment. But this is just not any old crab apple. This is a Donald Wyman crab apple. And Donald Wyman, you may have heard of. He was a very well-known horticulturist that worked here at the Arboretum in the 50s. This is just a real treat to have something, a cultivar or a variety of a crab apple that the Arboretum introduced, and have it turned into this really lovely tree. And I'm going to just drop my screen here a little bit. Apologies for the movement. There's all kinds of wind and shakiness that I'm competing with. Sorry. And just to get a really better look at what we call the nabari, or the root flare. And so this has a really lovely root flare that you can see here. And you can also see that, and I'll show you some better examples, because I'm sure people are wondering, how the heck do you actually get them to take their form? Because this is not necessarily how Donald Wyman crabapple wants to grow. And so you can see up here on this branch, maybe, you can see some wire. This is aluminum wire that is actually wrapped around the branch. And if we want the branch to bend in a specific way, we'll wrap the wire around the branch, bend that wire, and the wire takes the branch with it. And you usually leave it on there for about a year or so until the plant has had enough time to grow. It's kind of like putting a cast on an arm, and you let that bone heal up. Not that we're breaking the branch, but because plants grow sort of, not only do they put on height, but they put on girth. And so when the branch is thickening up, if we hold it in a very specific way with the wire, that branch will thicken up and will hold its form for a little while. This is not a permanent thing. This is something that bonsai they require constant maintenance. And so with some plants, depending on their age, depending on the species, you may be wiring it every year, or you may be wiring it every 3 to 4 years.
Steve, I have 2 questions about the crabapple. Someone wants to know how old it is, and is it a garden variety crabapple turned into a bonsai?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I'll answer the latter first, which is you can bonsai pretty much anything. If you can get it to live, and you pay enough attention to it, these plants, like this Don Wyman crabapple, would live outside no problem. It would get much bigger. This one is probably, we went back into Marty's records and which is mostly pictures, and this is about 35 years old. And so again, just because, in terms of age, it is grand that we have plants from the 1700s and 1800s, but that doesn't necessarily make them bonsai. What makes them bonsai is the style. And so there are gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous plants out there that are 30 and 40 years old, but they just don't have that long lineage. And we can take pretty much anything. So this is a crabapple. The original Don Wyman is growing over at Peters Hill. You know, so, you know, and I'm just going to pan over to this plant. This is another Marty plant here. This is a tilia or a linden. And again, this is a common street tree, you know, that if left to its own devices, and this is probably, again, probably like 35 years old. If it was just a linden that was planted in the ground, it would be, you know, 30 feet tall and have a, you know, an 18 to 20 inch caliper trunk. All right, I'm stopping the video and I'm going to move. I'm looking around, actually. I'm looking around. Oh, before I leave, hold on, this is important because speaking of starting bonsai, we at the Arboretum have been working on some of our own plants. And if I can get my screen to come back, great, you can see it. Okay, so what you're looking at here is a Ginkgo forest that we're creating. So these are some of the rarest. So we get a lot of really cool, interesting, rare plant material here through our collection endeavors. And some of those plants, and this is not, ginkgo can grow, you know, outside here, no problem. But some of the plants that we collect might be marginally hardy. They might not survive a Boston winter, but we still want to be able to hold the germplasm of that plant. And so we're also using this collection, especially anything that might be threatened or endangered. We're using this collection to bonsai those plants, and they might not be the prettiest plants in the world, but we're using the bonsai style of dwarving the plant so that we can, you know, these plants do not spend the winter outside. It's not that the species can't survive the winter. It's that once you have something in a pot with its roots exposed, that really, you know, that will lend it to not surviving the winter. And so
Steve, we've got a few more questions. I'm sorry if that's interrupting.
Yeah, sure. Let me just finish this thread and then I'll take questions.
Absolutely.
But you know, we're also starting our own plants here. So this is a Ginkgo Forest, and this material, it's material that we already have out in the grounds, but it was so important because it's material that is from some of the last remaining wild ginkgo in the world. That, you know, once you start growing this stuff, that's a tough plant to compost. And so we said, well, why not? Let's take some of these plants, let's make a forest. Let's get things going here. To the right of it, and then I'll get to questions. This is actually one of Marty's plants that has been, that is being rehabbed for some root issues that it has. But I wanted to show you an example of how things start. So with the other one, we were starting it in a plastic Anderson pot. This one here, the more traditional way to start plants is to make a wooden box. And so again, this plant is probably about 35, 40 years old. And every once in a while, these plants, they need a rest, they need a break. And so we'll put them in a big wooden box like this, whether we're starting the plant as bonsai or whether we're giving it some rest, and just to allow it to generate some new branches, some just put some energy into the root system, give it a break before, you know, maybe in like 2 to 3 years, this plant will then come out. It'll be put into a training pot which will be a bonsai pot that is slightly smaller than this, but larger than a display pot. It might be in that training pot for about 2 to 3 more years before then it's put into a display pot. And you know, the cycle keeps going on and on. I'll take questions now.
Thank you. We want to know, how do you feed the bonsai, and do the pots they live in need to have special qualities? And what keeps them from growing to their natural size?
Sure. Again, I'll start with the reverse. Pruning the shoots and pruning the roots will keep them in check, essentially. And some plants, it works better than others. The best species to use with bonsai are ones that where the leaves will actually shrink to scale with the plant. So that's why you'll often see Chinese maple, Chinese elms being used, because a Chinese elm leaf that might be, you know, normally this big, in bonsai it will shrink down to 1/8 of the size. Same thing with Japanese maples, and a lot of that has to do with the plant reacting to the buds being pinched back, and the roots being pruned. Keeping in mind that when we repot, you know, when you repot something, a house plant at home, you're probably putting it into a pot that is slightly larger than the one that you had it in. With bonsai, with penjing, for the most part, unless we're making a big move, we're putting it back in the same pot. So we're keeping it sort of in its same shoe for as long as we can. In terms of pots, selecting the pots, there are people that are actually more interested in the pots. We call them potophiles, and more interested in the pots themselves than the plants. And so it is a very, all of the styling, the display, the quality of the pot, the appearance of the pot, it's all very personal. And that's why, you know, when, you know, you talk about art critics, bonsai people are crazy art critics, because what one person may think is gorgeous or is hot and innovative and nuanced, another person will say, well, that is garbage. And some people try to make statements, you know, with pots. Other people stick to tradition. In Japan, there are very strict rules associated with bonsai. Strict rules in terms of branching, strict rules in regards to the type of pot one would use. You want the pot to really complement the plant, but not show up the plant. And so if you have a very sort of thick trunk that looks heavy, then you want to balance that, and you want to make sure that your pot looks what we would say is masculine and very broad and heavy, but again, not to outshine the plant. Whereas if you have something very, very sweepy and elegant, and maybe the crown is quite thin and what we might think of as feminine, we're going to want a thinner pot, something that is going to complement the actual look of the tree. And in terms of fertilizing, feeding them, again, because this soil, you can see, can you see? Yeah, you can see, is very rocky. The soil here really consists of this lava rock, which is these larger particles, and then a soil that's called akadama, that's from Japan. It's baked, and I don't know if you can see, but you can see just like a little pellet of it. But if I squish it, it basically turns to clay. So you want a mixture of that. The akadama holds the moisture and the nutrients, and then the lava provides the drainage. And that's what we want. We want, when we water this, we want the water to almost immediately flow through very quickly. And that's why sometimes they need to be watered 3-4 times a day, because you want the water moving through. You don't want root rot. If we see water pooling up at the top here, we're going to know that the roots are getting too congested and it's time to repot. That's one of the indicators. And so when we're watering, we might give them a liquid fertilizer, kind of like Miracle Grow. But otherwise, we also have these, see here, you can see this is a little basket, and inside the basket, I can open it here, are these little fertilizer pellets. June, who is our bonsai master, he likes to use these special fertilizer pellets, organic fertilizer pellets that come from Japan. Not entirely sure what's in them and what I just touched, but I'll wash my hands later. Yeah, you don't want to hit these hard with fertilizer because, again, you want to you don't want to starve them. You want to keep their health up, but you don't want to give them so much food that they're growing out of control that you have to do so much pruning and so much pruning of shoots and roots.
Steve,
Yes.
you have about 5 more minutes and we have 2 more questions.
All right. I'm moving right now, so why don't we take a few questions while I'm getting set up?
Oh, well, someone had asked if we could have a quick glimpse of the bottom of the wood constructed pot you were touching. They asked about the drainage holes.
Yes. Let's see. Now, with the wood, we don't necessarily have to put drainage in, I don't think. Let me see what was done here. I'm not going to turn my camera on yet. Okay, there are drainage holes. All right, let me do this. Let me get set up because I can definitely do this. I'm just going to get at a different angle. And I'm going to put this on so I can see what I'm doing here. All right, I'm going to drop this down. Bear with the movement, folks. Might want to just close your eyes. Okay.
I have
Go
one
down
more
here.
general question after this.
Go for it, yeah.
The general question is, are there Harvard courses, workshops, or internships that train bonsai workers?
We offer a few classes, or we did anyway. Right now, all live classes have been suspended. But it's actually, now that people bring it up, I think it would be an interesting thing to do, on camera. It's totally doable. But no, not at Harvard. Just here at the Arboretum, which I guess is Harvard. I don't know if you can see, but you can see that in this plywood, there are, let me see, 1, 2, there's like 8 holes that have been drilled for drainage. And inside of those drainage holes, there's, and that's the same with all bonsai pots. There are these little screens that they wire in to keep the soil from all falling out. So it's a very simple construction. These are, non-pressure treated 2x6s and a slab of non-pressure treated 3/4 inch plywood for the bottom. Very simple. And the plant seems to love it. Okay, I am moving. We're going now into house 4 of our greenhouses. And I'm going to temporarily pull this plug, quiet that fan, so we don't have that background noise. And so what you're going to see here are plants that have been repotted this year and are now in recovery. It has been, not only has it been cold, and it's really not the cold that has been the problem, but it's been really windy. And so I'm going to turn this on here, see what we can see. There we are. And so, again, when these plants are taken out of their pots, their roots are pulled out with a small rake. The roots are trimmed back, and then they are wired back into the pot, and new soil is stuffed in. So there's a lot of trauma that the root system has to endure. And so while those plants are recovering, it's best not to have them in very windy situations because, again, the plants are still transpiring, they're pushing water out, and with compromised root system, they can't take the water up fast enough, and that's when we can begin to run into some problems. So what you're looking at, let's see, I'm just going to move us in a little bit here. Try to avoid the bumps. So these here are some of our Japanese maples that have been repotted. Most of the Japanese maples are from 1887. And here's something that's really cool. Ooh, sorry for the movement. I'll see if you can see this. But this one here is flowering. So again, this is a Japanese maple that could live outside, no problem. It would be much larger if it were planted in the ground. But it's doing all of the same things that a normal tree would be doing, which is putting out foliage. And these leaves at this point, if this was planted in the ground, would be about, maybe 3 to 4 times bigger than this. And then you can see the little flowers coming. And if left on, which we'll pinch these off just to conserve the strength of the plant, these will turn into those little samaras or those Pinocchio noses, whirlybirds, or whatever you want to, people call them different things. And even those will be little tiny samaras compared to the much larger ones that would be on a full-size plant. I'm going to swing us around. I know our time is getting short. And I want to show you a really nice plant here. I'm going to stop the video just for a minute because there's going to be a lot of movement. This was one that was repotted recently. This is this is our Trident Maple. And it is probably my favorite. It's tough to pick a favorite. It's kind of like picking a favorite kid. You don't talk about it too much, but you have one. And this one here is just really nice. I'm going to see. Believe me, keeping the camera off is in everyone's best interest right now. Okay, let's see what we got. Yeah, that's nice. So this one here was started in 1852, and it is just a really gorgeous specimen. And I'm gonna turn it around, and you can see some of the really cool features. This trunk has really come into its own over the years. We have some really great photos of the plants when Anderson had them, when early on at the Arboretum, and the plants look great then. But boy, the older these get, the better they look. And so this is just a really gorgeous plant. I'm going to pause camera again and show you another one of our Chamaecyparis, large Chamaecyparis plants. They're evergreens from the Anderson collection that was recently repotted. And this greenhouse is packed right now. It's absolutely packed with plants. Because of these odd conditions that we have going right now, these plants all want to really be outside, but we know what's best for them. Okay, so I'm going to show you what's going to be 3 different plants and just talk about the pots a little bit. what you're looking at here, this guy right here, this one here is from 1862. And I'm pretty sure that you can see in this shot that there's all kinds of hardware up here. So you've got some wires, you've got some rebar, the branches themselves have copper wiring on them. And so I mentioned Jun Imabashi, he is our bonsai master. His master, Mr. Yamamoto, came to visit the United States for the first time last fall, and he was dying to see the collection. And he and June spent 2 weeks working in the collection and making some adjustments. And the work that they did to readjust these plants is kind of like going to the chiropractor for the first time and getting your back, your spine arranged in the proper way. You know, those of us who have been looking at these plants for a long time, all of a sudden in the course of 1 week, they were really transformed. And so this is obviously not permanent stuff, but they, you know, these will be held for a couple of years. You have to watch the points where the wire is around the branch, or where you might have a wire rubbing a branch, because if it starts to cause damage, or the wire starts to bite into the branch as the branch gets thick, you have to cut it out of the way. But you can also see that this is in a round, what we were calling a dragon pot, because I don't know if you can see it, but there is the impression of a dragon at the base of the plant, or on the pot itself. These plants were which are part of the Anderson collection. They were part of the renovation that Colin Lewis did from the late 90s into the early 2000s. You know, one of the advantages of putting a plant in a round pot is that it gives you more time to figure out what the front of the plant is. And so in bonsai, you have a front of the plant, you have a back of the plant. The front is obviously going to be the place that is going to be the best view. And that front changes as the plant itself changes. And so I'm going to swing us over, and I saw another question come in. I promise I'll get to questions. I'm going to swing over to this Chamaecyparis here. Again, same vintage, but you can see it's in a very different shaped pot. And you can see that Mr. Yamamoto also worked on this one. So you see some rebar here. You see guy wires, again, pulling the branches down, moving certain things out. And one of the things that they did when they were working on these plants was deciding what's the front and what is the back. And you know, when you have a round pot, you can just keep spinning it. Once you've committed to a face, or a front rather, then you can put it in this more proper rectangular pot. And that's what he did this year. So in the fall, they reshaped the top, and they decided where the front was going to be, so that come repotting season, which is usually April, they were going to, that we sourced this pot and put it in this, and it looks really, really spectacular right now. Can't wait to get this one outside.
Steve, I think we have time for just one more question, if that's okay.
Sure.
Someone had asked for you to suggest a venue near Boston to take bonsai classes.
Sure. So there's a couple. I mentioned June. He is the bonsai master at New England Bonsai and Garden, they're fantastic people, and they have great classes. They have a really nice class space to work in. And so I would check out what they have to offer. Obviously, right now, live classes might be tricky. Might not. They might be, eventually working it out soon. The other place in Littleton, out by my way, is Bonsai West, and Mike 11 is awesome. And again, I'm not entirely sure what Michael offers in terms of classes. I think that they do offer classes, but both places you can't go wrong, and they're fantastic people. Is there anything that I left out that anybody else has questions on? And we're hoping in another week or so that these plants will be moved outside, because it's quite cramped in here, and these are outdoor plants. They prefer to be outside. So once we start to see, and we've already started to see new root growth, we can sort of kind of scoot the soil aside, and we can see the new root shoots coming out, these little white heads that are starting to regenerate, and that's a really great sign.
Thank you so much, Steve. This has been fascinating. May I ask a huge favor? Would you mind stepping in front of the camera so we can see the face behind all this amazing knowledge? And when we're in the Arboretum, we can wave to you.
Yes, that's my least favorite part of the...
I know, just wave. Thank you. But thank you. This was so wonderful. And I want to thank Steve for your time, and thank Rachel for your wonderful introduction. Again, there are great connections to be made on our website with the exhibition. We have recorded this talk, and we will be figuring out how best to share that. I just saw that someone asked that question, so we will keep you posted on that. But it's been really wonderful having you all, and I hope you can get outside and enjoy this beautiful day. And until we see you again, thanks for your wonderful support, and happy spring.